They thought I was asleep. But there's no anesthesia capable of silencing an ear trained to listen to nonsense. And my children's that night sounded like an orchestra of vultures at an inheritance meeting. I don't know if it was the morphine or the fear, but I remember every word, every silence. I lay there, pale-faced, the IV dripping with an insulting sluggishness, and they, my three prodigies of genetics and disappointment, were talking half a meter from me, thinking the beeping of the monitor was my farewell. What they didn't know was that every beep marked a note in my future revenge. Charles, the eldest, with his bargain bin lawyer voice, said, "If Mom doesn't improve, we have to start the incapacity process. We can't wait for this to get complicated." Marina, always so spiritual, so zen in her nerves, replied, "Yes. And the house, it doesn't make sense to keep it empty. We can sell it and split something, that way we all win." And David, my youngest, the musician without a stage, muttered something that hurt more than everything before. "I don't want trouble, but they're right." That's when I understood that love can go into a coma too. The room smelled of disinfectant, of wilted flowers, of abandonment. My throat was dry, but my mind was lucid, sharp, awake. Lucy, my granddaughter, had left her phone on the nightstand with a sweet message. "In case you want to listen to music, Grandma." What irony! Instead of music, I hit record. And while they spoke about me in the past tense, I captured every word, every lie, every sigh of their hypocrisy. When they finally left the room, closing the door with that softness you use to close betrayals, I took a deep breath. Dr. Rivers walked in. A man in his 50s, with under-eye circles that smelled of double shifts and the patience of a saint. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Evelyn?" he asked, adjusting the monitor. As if I'd attended my own funeral and gotten bored. He smiled with that blend of pity and respect you see in doctors who still remember their patients are people. "Your children are worried," he said. "Of course, doctor. When money's involved, love always turns administrative." I was alone again. The clock read 3:10. The monitor's beeps kept faithful, stubborn, almost mocking. I, who had taught literature all my life, started to think how I'd write that moment if it were fiction. But no, it wasn't a story. It was my life, turned into a file. With the little steadiness I had, I opened the phone's email and sent myself the audio. Subject: "In case something happens to me." Recipient: "My old account, the one I used when I taught." And in the body of the message, a single line: "They thought I was asleep." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, the blue reflection on my thin hands. I promised myself that if I made it out of there alive, I would recover not only my home, but also my dignity. Even if I had to feign fragility, play the madwoman, and drink coffee with the devil if need be. And before I keep telling you how I did it, I want to use this moment for something different. Before continuing my story, I'm really curious to know where in the world you're joining from today and at what time. I'd truly love to read you in the comments. Sometimes telling a story isn't just venting, it's finding ears that still listen with a wide-awake heart. Back to the hospital. At dawn, I heard Dr. Rivers' voice in the hallway. "She's still lucid," he was saying, "but the children are pressuring me to sign the incapacity report." Another nurse murmured, "Poor thing. She probably has no idea what's going on." And there, I swear, an inner laugh took me, a silent cackle, because I did know, more than they did. I knew what they plotted, what they hid, and above all, what they were going to regret. I looked at the ceiling. The monitor kept marking my heartbeat. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound told me, "Hold on, Evelyn, this is just starting." And I thought, if they want to keep me asleep, let them try. But don't complain when I wake up. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the hospital light seemed too white, as if someone had put an interrogation lamp above my head. A young nurse offered me breakfast, but I only wanted air and silence. My body was tired, yes, but my mind was working with a clarity that scared me. I'd spent the night listening to the echo of my children's voices, looping like a sick song that wouldn't leave my head. And though anyone might think a woman my age would be grateful to still be alive, what I felt was something else, a strange blend of anger, irony, and lucidity. Doctor. Rivers appeared soon after, with his wrinkled coat and a coffee in hand. You could tell he hadn't slept. Mrs. Evelyn, your progress is good. We could discharge you if you keep this up. Then discharge me, doctor, I said without thinking. I don't want to die here of boredom. He smiled, maybe not understanding I meant it. Your children asked if you need someone to take care of you at home. No, thank you. I already have someone to take care of me. Myself. I signed the discharge with a still trembling hand, and as I did, I thought that signature was like a permit to return to my own stage. To return home, yes, but not to the same life. Outside, the air smelled of gasoline and winter. That smell did me good because it was real, because it stung the nose and not the heart. Charles came to get me in his new car, one of those that smell like ego and installments. He helped me sit, fastened the seatbelt with rehearsed tenderness, and turned on the heat. Mom, you need to rest, he said, watching the road. Don't strain yourself. Relax, son. I don't have enough strength to be a threat. No one said that. No, but you think it. And thinking leaves marks, too. He didn't speak again during the drive, only the sound of the engine and an occasional sigh when he noticed me staring out the window. I watched the buildings pass as if they were old memories. Everything the same, everything different. At some point I thought maybe old age is that seeing the city stand while you crumble inside and smile so no one notices. When I got home, the door seemed heavier than usual. My neighbor Julia popped up as soon as I came in, with her floral robe and her hair frizzed as always. At last, Evelyn. I thought they'd left you there like a museum piece. Almost, dear. But they ran out of budget for flowers. We laughed, because in the absence of health, at least we had humor left. Julia helped me set the bag on the table and put water on for coffee. How did it go with the kids? She asked. With my kids, fine. With the vultures, so-so. She looked at me, not getting it, but didn't push. She's a good friend. She knows when not to ask. While we talked, I went to the mailbox, more out of habit than curiosity. Among bills and supermarket flyers was a thick brown envelope with the family court letterhead. Julia handed it to me. Must be a fine or something from the bank, she said. Yes, or something worse. I opened it calmly, because I already had a hunch. Sometimes the body knows before the head. And there it was, a preventive incapacitation request, in my name, signed by my eldest son, Charles Martin. The justification was a gem. The lady shows temporal confusion and lack of judgment in handling her assets. I laughed so hard Julia got scared. What is it? Nothing. Just that it seems I'm officially a certified lunatic now. I put the envelope in the sideboard drawer, under the embroidered napkins. I sat in front of the steaming coffee, and while Julia talked about her grandson, I thought about the word incapacitation. What irony. I've spent 70 years solving other people's problems, educating minds, reading Shakespeare and Garcia Marquez, and now someone has to decide whether I can manage my own keys. In the afternoon, I took a long shower, let the hot water give me back some strength. I looked at myself in the mirror. The dark circles looked painted in ink. Don't give up, old girl, I told myself softly. The war is just starting. Later, Charles came back with grocery bags and a tone that reminded me of when he was 6. I bought you yogurts, fruit, those cookies you like, he listed while opening the fridge. How thoughtful. If it weren't for you trying to steal my house, I'd kiss your forehead. Mom, don't say nonsense. Nobody wants to steal anything from you. Sure, dear. Just protect me from myself, right? Exactly. He said it without irony. And that, exactly, pierced me like an icy dart. When he left, I turned on the living room lamp and sat to write in an old notebook. I noted everything. Date, time, every word I remembered. I didn't trust my memory, although I knew it wouldn't fail me. But I wanted proof, because betrayal, when written, leaves less room for forgiveness. Julia came back later with a soup tureen. I'm leaving you some broth, in case you get hungry. Thanks, Julia. You seem calm. Calm, yes, and lucid, which is worse for them. After dining alone, I turned on the TV and raised the volume. I didn't care about the show, I just wanted the neighbors to think I was distracted. In reality, I was thinking. Laying out the beginning of a plan that had no shape yet, but did have a purpose. I didn't know how or when, but that recording stored in my email would be my key. That night, I slept little. I dreamed of a clock with no hands, only a single needle that always pointed to the same place, my house. When I woke, still with that hospital beep lodged in my chest, I poured a coffee and looked at the court envelope once. More. I thought about calling my children, confronting them, yelling, but I held back. No, that's what they expected, an unhinged old woman, a mother out of control. I would give them just the opposite: calm, method, and strategy. I lit a candle, not out of faith, but for light. I like watching shadows move. Then I promised myself something, a promise so clear I still feel it like an invisible tattoo. If they wanted my silence, they would have to listen to the noise of their own conscience. And so it all began, on that ordinary day that smelled of coffee, court papers, and betrayal. Outside, the sun had already set, and inside my home, for the first time in a long while, I was starting to truly wake up. The next morning dawned mild and gray, one of those when the sky seems stuck halfway between wanting to rain or spare your life. I'd slept badly, my head full of plans that wouldn't quite set. The court envelope was on the dining table, its edge slightly bent, as if even the paper felt guilty for being there. I made a strong coffee, the kind that scrapes the kindness off mornings, and opened the window just to check the world kept turning, even if mine had shifted its axis. Outside, the baker waved by habit, and the neighbor's dog barked with clockwork punctuality. Everything stayed the same, and yet everything was different. Julia appeared in her floral robe, her smile a bit more curious than usual. "I heard you up late last night," she said, sitting without being invited. "Couldn't sleep?" "No, I was thinking about my children. And? Thinking whether I raised them or assembled them in a traitor factory." She laughed with that simple humor she uses as a shield. I smiled too, because laughter is sometimes the most elegant way to hide rage. After the second coffee, I decided to put order in my head. I took a new notebook, wrote the date, and beneath it, a phrase, survival plan. It wasn't a revenge plan yet, though it smelled a lot like one. My idea was simple: feign fragility, watch, wait, and, above all, record. People show who they are when they think no one's looking, and my children were used to me not looking anymore. Fine, I'd give them what they wanted, in appearance. By mid-morning, Lucy showed up with her backpack and the energy of 18, hair messy, honest smile. "Gran, Mom says you shouldn't be alone." "Your mother should check her karma before she checks my fridge," I answered, and I saw her laugh like when she was little, that laugh that gave me back the sense in pretending sanity. "I brought the old tablet," she said, "so you can watch shows or something." I nodded, a mix of tenderness and calculation. Technology, which used to seem a nuisance, had suddenly become my ally. I asked her to teach me how to record voice notes, copy files, upload them to the cloud. She, suspecting nothing, taught me patiently and hugged me before leaving. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, my life. But promise me you won't tell anyone I seem this well." "Why?" "Because I need them to think the opposite." The afternoon was long. I spent hours replaying the hospital audio, sharpening my ear to distinguish voices, tones, sighs. There were lines so clear they felt like knives. "The house doesn't make sense empty. We have to act fast. Mom doesn't reason anymore." Every word was another stone in the wall they were building between them and me. I took notes on everything, detailing each second as if preparing a police report. Around 6, the bell rang. It was David, my youngest. His face was a map of recent defeats: 2-day beard, evasive gaze, nervous hands. "Hi, Mom. Hi, son. Here to visit me or to practice family hypocrisy? Don't start. I just wanted to see how you are. Alive, for now, though some are arranging the opposite." He sighed, sat on the couch, and began twirling his keys. I watched him in silence, measuring each gesture, each doubt. "Mom," he said at last, "I need to ask you a favor." There it was, the phrase that announces a storm. "Money?" He nodded. "Not much. I fell behind on some things, but I can pay you back." "What things, David?" "Nothing serious, just a loan." "From whom?" "A guy in the neighborhood, Samuel. He owns a bar, you know. Helped me when I lost my job. And now he's charging for the help, right?" "A little, yes." I looked at him a long moment. I'd always had a soft spot for that son, maybe because he never could quite learn to lie. "Do your siblings know?" "No, of course not. They'd kill me." "No, son, they already killed me. You're next in line." I gave him some money, not all he asked for, enough to calm the desperation. I hugged him goodbye and smelled the scent of his childhood mixed with cheap tobacco and defeat. "Take care, David," I whispered. "And if you see Samuel, tell him old women know how to negotiate too." When he left, silence returned with a new density. I sat at the table, turned on the lamp, and opened the tablet Lucy had left me. I discovered I could record with a single tap, and I did, just to test it. My voice came out firm, deep, with a tone I hadn't used in years. Day 3. My children think I'm a burden. They don't suspect I'm their mirror. I saved the file and sent it to my email, along with the hospital audio. I had everything in duplicate in case something happened. Because something would happen, I knew it. At night, Julia knocked again. "I brought you some soup," she said. "Didn't know if you felt like cooking." "Thank you, Julia." Today I cooked strategies, and those aren't edible. She sat with me for a bit, and while she talked about trivialities, I noticed life kept flowing around this secret only I knew. Outside, the neighbors watched telenovelas, kids played on scooters, and I was quietly planning the masterpiece of my revenge. Before bed, I stared at the ceiling again. I thought about Charles, about Marina, about David, and felt something I hadn't expected. It wasn't hate, it was disappointment, an ancient fatigue, as if all my motherhood had rusted in my chest. I closed my eyes and promised myself to stay sane, but not tame. That night, while the city slept, I started to wake up for real. I was no longer the freshly operated woman feigning fragility. I was an old woman with purpose, with time, and with memory. And that, though my children didn't know it yet, was the worst threat they could face. 2 days went by in a deceptive calm, the kind that teaches you to distrust clocks because they seem to move just to distract you. I'd had an early breakfast, not hungry but out of habit, and was checking email on the tablet when the phone rang. It was Marina, with that voice of hers that tries to sound compassionate and ends up smelling of condescension. She said she wanted to see me, that it seemed important to reconnect energies after the scare of my surgery. I listened to her talk about chakras and vibrations, and meanwhile I thought how easy it is to dress guilt up as spirituality. I accepted her invitation, of course, because an actress preparing her scene doesn't refuse a rehearsal. She told me to come to the yoga studio she runs, the same place where she teaches inner peace while negotiating real estate contracts on the phone, hidden under the mat. I walked slowly, more out of strategy than weakness. I wanted everyone to see me fragile, like an old woman struggling to stay on her feet. When I arrived, the smell of incense hit me with the force of the fake. The whole place seemed designed to make you forget reality. Soft lights, slow music, professional smiles. Marina came out to meet me in white clothes, perfect, radiant, as if the lighting owed her a favor. "Mom, I'm so happy to see you looking well," she said, hugging me without quite touching me. "Hypocrisy looks good on you, daughter," I thought, but I only said, "I had to see where my donations end up, even if just as scented candles." She laughed, thinking it was a compliment, and led me to a room where several young women were doing exaggerated breathing. She offered me ginger mint tea and began her speech. The importance of detachment, serenity as a path. I watched her with a mix of tenderness and second-hand embarrassment. How curious, I thought. A daughter who preaches peace while conspiring against her mother. During the talk, she pointed to me with pride. "She's my inspiration," she said. "The woman who taught me to let go." The students applauded, and I had to stifle a laugh. "That's true, daughter. I've let go so much that even my house is looking for a new owner." One of the attendees, a serious young woman with her hair tied back, handed me a towel and whispered, "Ma'am, you're a legend here." "Yes, dear. Legends often have tragic endings," I replied. When the session ended, Marina took me to her little office, an immaculate space smelling of sandalwood and invoices. While she pretended to look for a paper, her phone rang. She answered without looking at me, and her tone changed completely. "Yes, it has to be done before the bank finds out about the clause," she said. "Don't worry, I have the papers." I heard it clearly. The clause. That word stuck to me, sticky as a stain. I pretended not to hear it, but filed every syllable in memory. When she hung up, she offered me more tea. "Mom, you should think about coming with me for a few days. I prefer to stay with my plants. They don't lie and don't need special care." She smiled with that sweet gesture she uses when she feels superior and walked me to the door. Before I crossed it, the assistant from before approached, eyes lowered but steady. "Ma'am, be careful," she whispered. "Your daughter is nervous. She's been talking for weeks with someone about property papers." "Thank you, dear. Don't worry, I've survived worse than nerves." I walked back home with the sun on my face and my mind burning. If there was a pending bank clause, then they were not only plotting to take my house, there was also some financial secret I didn't know. When I arrived, I opened the drawer with my late husband's old papers documents I hadn't touched in years. I put on my glasses and started going through them one by one. Contracts, receipts, bank letters. And there, among the yellowing documents, I found a mortgage contract canceled more than a decade ago, with a residual guarantee clause. Not a big deal, but in the hands of someone with bad intentions, it could become the perfect excuse to move properties. While I read, Julia came in without knocking, as always. "What are you doing surrounded by papers, Evelyn?" "Hunting ghosts," I said. "The dead sometimes sign more than they should." She looked baffled, but brought me coffee and stayed a while. "I saw your daughter on social media. Looks like she's organizing a spiritual retreat at a country house." "Oh, really? Interesting. I didn't know she'd booked any house." "That's what the ad said, look." She showed me a video on her phone where Marina talked about a space for transformation and showed photos of a house I recognized instantly. Mine. I had to sit down. My throat burned, not from sadness, but from that indignation that rises slowly, like sour wine. Was she really planning to use my house to sell her show? I laughed softly, a dry laugh without humor. "Well, Julia, looks like I'll have guests soon." "What are you going to do?" "What a decent mother does. Pretend I know nothing, until the right moment to prove otherwise." That night, before sleeping, I opened the tablet and recorded another voice note, calm but firm. Day 5. I visited Marina. She sells peace but buys guilt. There's something called a clause. I have to find out what it is before she uses it against me. I saved the file, turned off the light, and stared at the ceiling. I felt everything start to take shape, each thread they pulled bringing me closer to the truth. Outside, the wind blew and branches brushed the glass, and that sound felt like my own breathing, persistent, uncomfortable, impossible to ignore. I closed my eyes with one certainty. When the time comes, I won't need to shout. It will be enough to press play. The night before, I hardly slept. Sleep brushed me, then slipped away as soon as I closed my eyes. My head was full of thoughts that couldn't sit still. Marina's call, the word clause, the certainty that each of my children was playing a game of their own, not imagining I had learned the rules. When dawn slipped through the curtains, I found myself standing in the kitchen, coffee in hand, and the feeling I was waiting for a sign. It didn't take long. In my email, among ads and overdue bills, there was one message with no subject. It was a single line. "Meet me today before noon. Paula." I didn't recognize the name at first, but then I remembered. Paula was the lawyer who worked with Charles at his firm, the one who offered me water the day I went to his office. With those attentive eyes of someone who listens more than she speaks. No further explanation, but I knew it wasn't random. I dressed slowly, chose the good scarf, and left with the same pulse you use walking to a duel. The firm was in a new, cold building, one that smells of marble and freshly counted money. I announced myself at reception, but didn't wait for permission. I know those hallways. I've walked many like them when I still taught, and they asked me for expert reports in courts. Paula met me in the corridor, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Evelyn, thanks for coming." "I'm not used to refusing mysteries," I replied. She asked me to follow her to an empty meeting room. On the table was a closed folder and 2 coffees already cooling. "I don't have much time," she said, "but there's something you should know. Your son is using your personal case to present himself as an example of ethical management of family assets. He's shown documents about your incapacity and uses them as his calling card with a new client." "And what do I gain from knowing this?" I asked. "Maybe nothing, maybe everything. But if something gets out of hand, I don't want to be complicit." I looked at her for a long time, trying to decide if she spoke from remorse or revenge. In the end, I believed a little of both. "Thank you, Paula. I always suspected even among wolves there's some distracted lamb." Before I left, she slid the folder to me. "This didn't leave here," she said. I cracked it open. I recognized my name, Charles's signature, and the court heading. I felt a heat rising up my neck, not fear, but anger. "How curious," I murmured. "They even cite me as the interested party." Precise word. I walked out without saying goodbye, because when a mother learns her son has used her life as advertising, manners don't matter. On the street, the air smelled of gasoline and burned leaves. I walked aimlessly, letting the noise of cars clean my head. At a light, I saw my reflection in a shop window. Gray coat, worn leather bag, stubborn expression. I didn't see myself old. I saw myself dangerous, and that gave me strength. Back home, I found Julia sweeping the entrance. "You left early," she said, in that friendly scolding tone. "I had to visit my ghosts," I answered. She followed me to the kitchen and watched me while I served coffee. "You look like you saw something you didn't like." "No, Julia. I saw exactly what I expected. And that's worse." She stayed quiet, knowing silence is sometimes the best company. I sat at the table and spread the papers from the folder. I started reading line by line, with the concentration you learn grading exams for years. The document was a draft for my incapacity declaration. It used my medical reports from the hospital and added phrases I'd never heard: tendency to confusion, impaired judgment, unstable emotional state. They'd used my postoperative symptoms as proof of dementia. My hands shook not from fear, but distilled indignation. I put the papers away, turned off my phone, and sat still for a few minutes. Then, I opened the tablet and recorded a new message. Day 7. I visited Charles's firm. Confirmed, it's not just ambition, it's premeditation. Paula gave me the documents. I don't know if she acts from guilt or justice, but at this point, the difference doesn't matter. The 3 children I had are turning my lucidity into a weapon against me. I only need time. I closed the recording and sent it to my email, like all the others. Julia came in again with a plate of cookies, and for a second, I wished I had her naivete, that way of looking at the world, without suspecting that the people you love most can sign your sentence with a smile. I spent the afternoon reviewing bank papers and called Notary Whitaker, an old friend of my late husband. I asked for an appointment the next day. "I want to update my will," I said. "Is it urgent?" "Let's say it's preventive before someone else does it for me." His silence was answer enough. When night fell, I turned on the radio. An old tango was playing, and I sat by the window with a glass of wine that tasted stronger than usual. I looked at the empty street, lights on in other windows, and thought all those homes kept secrets, but mine was competing for the top prize. I remembered Dr. Rivers's words at the hospital, that phrase that had lingered: "She's still lucid, but the children are pressing." I realized that deep down, he had seen what I had too. Maybe I'd need his testimony. Later, I thought. Before bed, I took the documents from my purse and put them inside a blue folder I labeled with a black marker. For me, just in case. I hid it in the gap behind the oven, a makeshift hideout no one would look in. Then I turned off the lights, but sleep didn't come. I lay there listening to the distant wind and the creak of old beams, imagining each of my children's faces when they discovered the helpless old woman was still pulling the strings. When fatigue finally beat me, I dreamed something absurd. Me walking down a corridor full of doors, and behind each one my children's voices whispering things I couldn't understand. Only at the end, an open door and my recorded voice, clear, calm, saying, "It's too late to regret it." When I woke, I knew that dream wasn't a metaphor, it was a warning. Because in that silent war my own children had started, the next move was mine. The next morning dawned under a flat, unbroken gray, the sort made for days when you decide to cross lines you can't erase. I got up earlier than usual, body tense but head calm, a dangerous calm, the kind that comes when you no longer have fear, only purpose. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and watched the neighborhood wake in its usual routine. The baker dragging the bread crate, the garbage truck's engine, windows opening as if each house breathed anew. I breathed too, but with the certainty that something important would happen that day, something that would start moving the missing pieces on this board where my children thought they were playing alone. I had an appointment with Notary Whitaker at noon, but before that I decided on a stop that wasn't in any plan. I'd thought a lot about David since the previous night, his debt, his guilty look, that tremor he couldn't hide. I knew if I left him alone he would sink and drag me with him, so I called early. He answered, groggy, as if nights had turned into punishment. "David, I want you to come get me," I said plainly. "We're going to resolve the bar thing." "Today?" "No need, Mom. I can fix it later." "No, son. Today. Don't make me repeat myself." He didn't insist. He knew that tone meant the decision was made. He picked me up before 10. He was pale, cold hands, eyes holding a mix of shame and relief. "You shouldn't have to come," he muttered as we walked to the car. "Of course I should. It's not every day a mother goes to negotiate with the devil." The bar was on a forgotten corner where shop shutters looked like they hadn't been raised in years. The crooked sign read, "The Oasis," and the irony was brilliant. Inside smelled of old smoke and spilled beer. A few customers, and a man behind the bar cleaning glasses, tall, mid-50s, the kind of presence that doesn't need to raise its voice to command. Samuel. He watched us enter and smiled with curious respect, like one who recognizes the courage of someone who shows up without hiding fear. "So you're the mother," he said, not offering his hand. "The same," I replied, "though I'm not here to cry, but to talk." David sat, head down. I stayed standing, because important conversations aren't held sitting. "My son told me he owes you," I began. "I won't ask details, I already have a sense, but I'm here to make clear that neither the money nor he will disappear." Samuel studied me in silence for a few seconds. "You've got grit, ma'am." "Most send intermediaries. I've no time for intermediaries, nor life to waste it on scares." He nodded, almost smiling. "Don't worry, I'm not a thug, just a businessman. But words are worth as much as money. Then let's make a deal. You'll have both. I'll see you paid, and my son will work here until he clears the debt. Not a day less, not a day more." Samuel folded his arms, weighed the proposal, and finally said, "Deal." We stayed a little longer. David said nothing, and, when we finally left, he took my hand like when he was small, and we crossed the street. "Thank you, Mom," he said hoarsely. "Don't thank me, son. Be grateful I still have the strength to face your ghosts. From now on, you face the next ones yourself." Outside, the air felt lighter, as if the wind had swept something foul away. I stood a moment in silence, watching David walk to the car. I thought there was still some tenderness in him, something worth rescuing, but that tenderness was no longer my priority. I reached the notary's office at noon sharp. Whitaker received me with his usual tired expression the one men wear who've read too much fine print. He offered me a seat and spoke with a formality that reminded me why I'd always liked him. He knew how to respect silences. "You said on the phone you want to modify your will," he began. Do you wish to revoke the previous one? Not exactly, I explained. I want to leave a new document on record, but with conditions. What kind of conditions? That the estate remains intact while I live, and that only inherits who hasn't tried to have me declared incapacitated. He looked up, a mix of surprise and admiration. Clever, he murmured, though hard to prove. I have recordings, emails, and witnesses. Believe me, proof will be the least of it. We spent an hour reviewing clauses, correcting terms, and in the end I signed without trembling. I felt something like relief, a new calm deeper than fear. As I left, the sun broke through the clouds. I walked slowly, savoring the cold air clearing my thoughts. When I got home, Julia was waiting with a nervous smile. They called several times, she said. Your eldest. Let him wait, so he learns to savor uncertainty. I told her roughly about the notary, without details. She listened with that mix of curiosity and admiration that makes me feel less alone. You're braver than you look, she said. No, Julia, just older, and with less time to pretend I don't understand what's going on. That night, as the house sank into its own silence, I poured a glass of wine and recorded in the tablet again. Day 9. Today I faced the bar, the notary, and my own limits. David has a breather. I have a strategy. Tomorrow there'll be a reaction. For sure doesn't matter anymore. I've recovered something I thought lost. Control. Not of my assets, but of my story. I saved the file, turned off the light, and listened to the murmur of the street. Passing cars, distant footsteps, an occasional dog barking. It all sounded as usual, but inside me something had changed. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a victim, or sick, or old. I felt awake, alive, and dangerously calm. The next morning rose quiet, with that kind of calm that hints something is being prepared behind each minute. I'd slept little again. My body wanted rest, but my mind kept going on its own, weaving and unweaving scenarios, timing moves, reviewing plays as if yesterday had been only rehearsal for something bigger. I turned on the TV with no sound, just to drown my thoughts, and watched meaningless images while the coffee went cold. In the screen's reflection, I saw my face and barely recognized it. Something different in my eyes, a mix of determination and fatigue I didn't recall seeing there. I told myself it was time for the next step, the definitive one, and there was no room left for hesitation. Past noon, Julia came shuffling in with that curious look she gets when she senses something important is about to happen. She brought a bag of cookies, but as soon as she entered, she set it on the table and crossed her arms. I can tell you're restless, she said. What are you plotting now? Nothing they don't deserve, I answered, realizing it sounded more dangerous than I meant. She laughed, nervous. I know that look. Same one you had when you decided to denounce the school principal for stealing funds, remember? Of course, I won. And they almost fired you. But I won. We sat and I told her, without much adornment, what I planned to do. I spoke of the papers, the recordings, the new will, and the need to stage a scene, an opening rehearsal of sorts for the signing my children were organizing, unaware I'd already written my version of the script. Julia listened with a mix of fright and fascination, like I was one of those women who exist only in movies. And what if something goes wrong? She asked, lowering her voice. Then I improvise. Not so different from teaching teenagers, only now I'm the one taking the exam. We rehearsed for quite a while. I asked her to pretend to be a notary, to read the papers aloud, to fake interruptions. We repeated the moves again and again, where to place the phone, when to press record, how to keep my voice steady even if my heart raced. Julia, half amused, half worried, followed my instructions with the clumsiness of someone who doesn't fully understand but wants to help. When we finished, she dropped onto the couch, exhausted. If this goes like you say, I'll give you a standing ovation. I don't want applause, Julia. I just want them to stop treating me like I'm half dead. That line hung in the air, and sadness slipped in through a crack. Julia looked at me with tenderness and said softly, Sometimes I hear you, and I don't know if you're getting revenge or saying goodbye. I didn't know what to answer. Maybe both things were the same. Near dusk, The doorbell rang. It was Lucy. She barged in without greeting, with the trembling energy of someone who's done something impulsive. "Gran, we need to talk. That never brings good news." She sat across from me, phone in hand. "I uploaded a fragment of the hospital audio the day you were in a coma. Just a few seconds, no names, for a college project on family. Manipulation." I stared without blinking. "And?" "It went viral." "Viral?" "Yes. Thousands shared it. People are asking who you are. They're calling you the grandmother who recorded her own betrayal." I kept quiet. I felt a mix of pride and vertigo. I didn't know whether to laugh or worry. "Well," I said at last, "looks like my voice has a better audience than my children." Lucy couldn't tell whether to laugh or apologize. "I didn't do it for shock, Gran. I just wanted people to hear what happens when no one's looking. Don't worry, dear. Sometimes truth needs a little scandal to be heard." While she spoke, my phone began to vibrate on the table. "Charles." I didn't answer. Then another call from Marina. Neither. When it rang a third time, I picked up. "What have you done, Mom?" His voice was tense, cold. "Are you aware of the mess you made?" "Oh, son, don't worry. No one mentions your name yet. This could have legal consequences." "Legal?" What a curious word for a lawyer who forges reports. Don't say nonsense. "No, of course. I only listen to it. I record it, and sometimes I share it." He hung up without goodbye. I stared at the phone a while, savoring the silence that follows conversations you know are turning points. Lucy hugged me, half scared, half proud. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Having children?" "Sometimes." "Waking up?" "Never." When she left, Julia returned with a bottle of wine. We toasted in silence, no words needed. Her eyes were wet. "You do realize there's no turning back now, right? I burned the bridges a while ago. All that's left is for them to see the smoke." That night I went to bed late, body light and mind alert. I imagined Charles scrolling through the comments, Marina trying to scrub traces of her name, David sunk between guilt and relief. I felt something like compassion for each of them, though not enough to forgive. Not yet. Outside, the wind blew, hard, branches scraping the window, and I thought I heard in that noise a promise that the end was near. I recorded one last note before sleeping. Day 12. Rehearsal done. Julia, my accomplice. Lucy, unwittingly, my messenger. The audio circulates, masks are cracking. Charles is furious, Marina scared, David silent. Not long now. Tomorrow, I'll begin the final act. I turned off the light. In the dark, I felt a different calm, not the peace of rest, but the one that comes before an explosion. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in many days, I didn't think about how to survive, but how to win. I barely slept a couple of hours that night, broken up, full of strange dreams where my children were sometimes kids and sometimes strangers in suits with a notary's smile. I got up before dawn and sat in the kitchen, the dim light on and my hands still on the table. I wasn't hungry or sleepy, just certain that day would be the point of no return, the border between all that had been and whatever remained standing after. The clock's ticking merged with my breathing, and for a moment I thought about all I'd done in silence to get here. Each lie I pretended to believe, each word I swallowed to buy time, each plan I wrote in the dark while they slept in their homes, convinced the old woman was finally defeated. I smiled at the thought. Defeated? No. Prepared. The phone vibrated shortly after 9. Charles. This time I answered. "Mom, the notary set the signing for noon. Marina and David are already notified." "Perfect," I said. "I'll be ready. Don't do anything weird, please." "This is all for your safety." "Of course, son. You know I never do anything weird." I hung up before he could say more and breathed deep. I checked my bag. Phone charged, the folder with documents, the handkerchief I always used at decisive moments. It was almost funny to think all of that fit in such a small bag. Julia came in without knocking, as always, eyes swollen with worry. "Are you sure about what you're going to do, Evelyn?" "Not sure. Convinced." "I'll go with you." "No. I want to do it alone." But if you don't hear from me in 3 hours, publish the audio." She looked scared, and I understood nothing more needed saying. The walk to the notary was long not in distance, but in memories. Every corner, every tree, every old store felt like it wanted to tell me something. I thought of my husband, how he would have reacted seeing us like this, turned into domestic enemies by the same thing that once united us: family. I arrived a few minutes early and saw them through the window. The 3 of them, impeccable, with that stiff posture of those going to an exam they already know they'll pass. Charles in a gray suit, Marina with her fake calm smile, David with lowered eyes, uncomfortable, as if all this was too big for him. When I entered, silence fell at once. "Mom," Charles said, standing, "it's so nice to see you." "I doubt that, but thanks anyway." The notary, a young man I didn't know, greeted us with forced politeness. "We're proceeding with the donation signing," he explained. "As I understand it, the family home is transferred to your children, with the life usufruct remaining in your name." I nodded with a serene smile. "Yes, that's what the paper says, though I like to think this is more of a social experiment." Marina coughed, nervous. David avoided my eyes, and Charles held my gaze with a mix of irritation and distrust. "Mom, let's not make this a drama. It's paperwork, nothing more." "Of course," I said. "Paperwork. Like deciding who gets the house of a woman who's still breathing." The notary tried to regain composure. "If everyone agrees, we can proceed." I took my phone out of my bag and set it on the table. No one seemed to notice. I turned it on, opened the recorder, and pressed play. Suddenly, the room filled with the voices from the hospital. The words floated in the air like invisible knives. "If Mom doesn't improve, we have to start the incapacity process. The house doesn't make sense, empty. We should sell it, split something. That way we all win." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with fingernails. Marina covered her mouth, David closed his eyes, and Charles, for the first time, seemed not to know what to say. "What is this?" he managed at last. "Your voice, son. Yours, your siblings, from that night in the hospital while I pretended to sleep. My will has a memory, in case you didn't know." "This is illegal," he said, trying to regain control. "You can't record private conversations." "Ah, but you can declare a conscious person insane. What a curious moral balance." The notary cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should suspend the act." "Yes," I cut in. "I think that's best. I'd rather sign my freedom than my surrender." I stood slowly, with the dignity that comes from knowing you owe no one an explanation. I took the phone, put it back in my bag, and looked at each of them. "You know what the worst part is? Not that you wanted my house, or my money, or my silence. The worst is you thought I wouldn't notice. That you believed the years make you blind, not cunning." No one spoke. Marina's eyes were glassy. David looked on the verge of tears, and Charles stood there, trying to maintain the facade of the responsible son. But his voice shook when he said, "Mom, it wasn't what you think." "No, son, it was exactly what I thought." The notary closed the folder slowly. "Ma'am, in light of what's happened, the process is suspended." I nodded. "Thank you, young man. For the first time in a long while, I feel someone did something right in this family." When I stepped outside, the sun hit my face, and I had to close my eyes. I breathed deep, letting the air clean me inside. I didn't feel joy or vengeance, just a kind of tired relief. I walked aimlessly for a while, letting the city's noise keep me company. In my pocket, the phone kept recording out of habit or instinct. That afternoon, back home, I opened the window and lit a candle. Julia arrived soon after, anxious to know how it went. I told her everything without stopping, and she listened without interrupting, lips pressed tight. "You did it," she said at the end. "You really did it." "Yes. And I don't regret it." "What now?" "Now they learn to live with the truth. I've lived long enough with their lies." That night I recorded another note, longer than the others. Day 15. Today I didn't sign. Today the masks all fell. I saw in their eyes the shadow of regret, but also of fear. I don't know if it's justice, but it looks like it. Tomorrow, maybe, the hardest part begins, learning to hear what you don't want to hear. I turned off the recorder, set the phone on the table, and poured one last wine. Outside, the wind had calmed and the neighborhood slept. I was sleepy too, but not from fatigue, from peace. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of silence no longer belonged to me. The next day, I woke lighter, but not tranquil. The calm I felt was the kind that settles after a storm, when it still smells like electricity and you're not sure if the sky will clear or crash again. I got up early, no alarm, with the sense of standing in the middle of something unfinished. Sunlight came in at an angle through the curtains, drawing lines on the floor, and there I was, sitting on the bed, replaying yesterday's scene like a movie. I didn't know if what I'd done was victory or a declaration of war, but I knew there was no going back. I poured a coffee, and while I drank it, caught myself smiling with a nearly sweet fatigue. I'd played all my cards and, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to lose. Mid-morning, there was a knock. Inspector Harris, a woman around 50, with a firm gaze and direct ways, the same who'd once come by when a neighbor was scammed. "Mrs. Evelyn Martine," she said, introducing herself. "I need to talk to you about a family matter." I let her in. She didn't seem hostile, but carried the posture of someone coming to impose order on a story that already smelled of conflict. "What family matter?" I asked, offering a seat. "Your son Charles filed a complaint for unauthorized dissemination of private conversations." I laughed, though it wasn't a happy laugh. "Ah, so he finally discovered freedom of speech reaches mothers too." She smiled, barely. "I'm not here to judge, only to understand. The audios that were posted went more viral than you imagine. People are weighing in, journalists are calling, and it seems your family has more than one version of events." "Doesn't surprise me," I said. "In this family, truth has always been up for debate." The inspector listened patiently. I told her everything from the beginning, without embellishing or exaggerating. The hospital, the conversation, the recording, the incapacity, the notary appointment. I omitted nothing. When I finished, she sat in silence for a few seconds and finally nodded. "I'll be frank, Mrs. Evelyn. Legally, there's not much they can charge you with. The conversation happened in your room, you were present, and the facts you exposed are real. But your family is quite divided. I'm not shocked. They've never been good at teamwork. Your daughter Marina went to court this morning. She says she wants to talk to you. And what does she expect me to say? I don't know. Maybe she wants to apologize." Half an hour later, the bell rang. It was her. No rehearsed smile, no air of superiority she wore like perfume. She looked exhausted, puffy-eyed, voice breaking. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she said as soon as the door opened. "I can't take this anymore." I let her in without a word. She sat across from me at the same table where I'd helped her with bills or listened to her complain about her life. "Everything is out of control," she went on. "People insult me online. My students ask if it's true." Nora walked out of the studio. "I suppose it's a bad moment to sell peace," I replied. Ironic. She dropped her head. "I know I hurt you, Mom. But it wasn't out of malice. I was just trying to stay afloat. And to do that, you needed to push me under, right? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Marina. Don't look for metaphors, you're not teaching a yoga class." We fell silent. Outside, cars passed, and the air carried the smell of toast from some nearby window. She raised her eyes, with tears I wasn't sure I believed. "I just want you to forgive me," she said. "I'm not a judge or a priest, but if you really want to redeem yourself, do something decent with all this." "Like what?" "Speak. Tell what happened. Not for me, for you. Lies are a slow poison, and they're already killing you." Before she could answer, David appeared at the door, unannounced, face tight. The bar owner was behind him, Samuel looking uncomfortable amid so much foreign drama. "Sorry to intrude, ma'am," Samuel said, "but your son wanted to talk and didn't know how." David couldn't even look at me. "Mom, I know I failed you. I kept quiet when I should have defended you." "I know, son. But I don't need defenders anymore, I need witnesses." Then that's what I want to be, he said, voice trembling, a witness. I'm not afraid now. Inspector Harris watched them all, taking mental notes. Suddenly, someone else knocked. Charles. He walked in without asking, suit rumpled, eyes of a man who's lost control of the script. This has to stop, Mom. You don't know what you're doing. On the contrary, son, for the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm doing. You're destroying us as a family. No, Charles, you destroyed yourselves. I just turned on the light so you could see it. Lucy, who had arrived minutes earlier without anyone noticing, was quietly recording on her phone, not out of malice, but reflex, knowing something important was happening. When Charles noticed, he tried to snatch it, but the inspector stopped him with a gesture. Let her. Sometimes recording keeps things from repeating. Silence filled the room again. The 4 children, the creditor, the police, the granddaughter, all in the same scene, as if life had decided to compress years of lies into a single afternoon. I drew a breath and without raising my voice, said, I don't want trials or revenge. I just want you to listen. I took my phone, hooked it to a small speaker, and played the final fragment of the recording, the one where Charles, not knowing it was still recording, said, If we get the signature, we keep everything. No one spoke. The inspector turned off the speaker with a slight motion. That's enough, she said. There's no crime to pursue here, just a truth to face. And she left, abandoning us in the dense silence that only remains after an earthquake. Marina stood and hugged me without asking. David cried openly. Charles, for the first time in his life, had no words. Lucy looked at me as if she couldn't quite believe what she'd witnessed. What now? She asked at last. Now, nothing, I answered. Let each of you sort it out with your conscience. That night I sat by the open window. Outside, the neighborhood looked the same, but something in the air had changed. Comments online kept multiplying. The calls didn't stop, and my name, my voice, that voice they wanted to silence, was everywhere. Lucy showed me messages from strangers on her phone. Thanks for saying what many hide. My mother went through the same. You speak for us. I smiled with a modesty that surprised me. I hadn't done it for fame but out of need, yet the echo was inevitable. Before bed, I recorded one last shorter note. Day 17. Today there were no screams, no signatures, no trials. Just truths with an open mic. Sometimes the punishment isn't losing everything, but seeing yourself without excuses. I turned off the tablet and stared into the dark. Outside, a dog barked in the distance, as if announcing some ending. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. For the first time in a long time, I felt the story no longer weighed on me. That the voice, at last, belonged entirely to me. The dawn of that last day felt different from all the others. The air had a new smell, a mix of damp earth and fresh bread slipping through the half-open window. The light came in slowly, as if it were afraid to wake me, and for a few seconds I thought it had all been a dream, a long nightmare dissolving with the sun. But then, I looked at the dining table strewn with papers, the tablet charging, the phone flashing with notifications, and I knew the story was still there. Alive, real, finished only in appearance. The coffee steamed in the cup, and I, for the first time in weeks, drank it unhurried, without the bitter aftertaste of worry that had accompanied it until now. Outside, the sounds were the usual ones, but they no longer sounded the same. I felt something akin to peace, though I didn't dare name it for fear it might break. Julia arrived early, wrapped in a coat that made her look smaller, and greeted me with a soft smile. I saw your face on TV, she said, pouring herself coffee. You can't imagine how many people are talking about you. I didn't do it to be talked about, I answered, but if it keeps one old woman from getting stepped on, let them talk all they want. She nodded with that look, mixing pride and worry. And your kids? They all called, even Charles. I didn't answer any. I don't want explanations today. We stayed silent a while, listening to the radio, which now mentioned my name among the day's curious news. The woman who pretended to be asleep to uncover her children's betrayal, they said, with that showman tone that turns any truth into entertainment. I wasn't offended, it made me laugh. I thought life had a strange sense of humor. You survive only to see yourself turned into an anecdote. After noon, Lucy arrived. She looked different, calmer, hair tied back, a new shine in her eyes. She hugged me tightly without a word and handed me a notebook. I wrote something, she said, about all this. I want to publish it at the university, but only if you say yes. I opened it. On the first page, a title, Things That Mustn't Fall Asleep. I felt a lump in my throat. Do it, I told her. But write it as a story, not as revenge. Revenge runs out, stories don't. She smiled and spent the day with me, helping me sort the papers, emails, documents that had been my weapons for weeks. At dusk, we put everything in a box and stored it in the bedroom closet. What if you need it again? She asked. If I ever need it again, it means they learned nothing, I answered, and we both laughed. Toward evening, I got the visits I knew were inevitable. David came first, with a bottle of cheap wine and a bouquet that looked bought along the way. He came in without a word, set things on the table, and sat across from me. I'm working every day at the bar, he said at last. Samuel treats me well, and he's not charging interest. I'm glad, son. Not because you're paying, because you're learning. I failed you. No. You just reminded me I still have something to teach you. Then Marina. No flowers, no rehearsed apologies, just a tired look and a lower voice than usual. I closed the studio. I'm going to start teaching for free at the community center. I don't know if it helps, but I want to try. It helps, I said. Not as charity as moral hygiene. And finally, Charles, no suit, no tie, with the face of someone who slept badly for many days. He stood in the doorway, not daring to step in. Mom, I've come to ask your forgiveness, he said, voice breaking. Forgiveness for everything. Late, I said, but not useless. He stepped forward and set an envelope on the table. I resigned from the firm. I can't keep looking people in the eyes. I didn't know what to say, maybe because no words could mend so much silence. I offered him a seat, but he preferred to stand. He looked at me for a few seconds, eyes wet, and left without another word. When the door closed, the sound was a period. Julia came back with a pot of soup. Lucy turned on the radio. David washed the dishes. Marina arranged the flowers. It all looked like a domestic painting, simple, almost happy. I was surprised to see them moving in peace like that, as if each understood that after so much noise, forgiveness isn't spoken, it's shown. That night I sat by the open window. The air was cold, but not uncomfortable. I watched the neighborhood lights, passing shadows, the neighbor's cat crossing the roof. I felt a kind of gentle relief, the kind that doesn't need fireworks. I took my phone and opened the recorder one last time. Day 21. It's over. Or maybe just beginning. Today, my children spoke to me with their old voices, the ones they'd lost between lawyers and excuses. I don't know if I forgave them, but it no longer hurts. I've recovered the house, my name and, above all, my voice. No one can incapacitate a woman who learned to narrate her own story. I saved the file, titled it Final, and sent it to my email out of habit more than need. Then I turned off the tablet and listened to the silence. Julia slept on the couch, Lucy typed in her notebook, and I thought about everything that had happened, how close I came to surrendering, and how easy it would have been to let myself sleep forever. I looked at the sky's reflection in the glass. The moon edged through clouds and, for some reason, it seemed to smile. Maybe because I was. Too without anger, without sadness, just with the relief of having said what had to be said. I breathed deep, turned off the lamp, and whispered in the dark. I wasn't asleep. I was just waiting for the right moment to wake the others. And then I let silence wrap me not as an ending, but as a quiet way to begin again. And well, that's how my story ends. I don't know whether to call it justice, luck, or the simple stubbornness of an old woman, but I can assure you of one thing. It's worth opening your eyes, even if it hurts what you see. If you made it this far, thank you for keeping me company, for listening without judging, and for staying to the end. And before you close this video, I'd love to know what you think of all this. Has anyone ever made you feel asleep when you were more awake than ever? I'll read you in the comments. And if you want to keep hearing stories like mine, real, raw, with that touch of irony life, give subscribe and stay close. You never know what the next truth will be that someone tries to silence, and as long as I can, I'm going to tell it.